Before we begin this show, Civil Defiance, we want to make something perfectly clear. The commentary and analysis regarding political manifestos, historical events, and current policy blueprints are based on verifiable public documents, academic historical analysis, and constitutionally protected political opinion and hyperbole of the host, Otto Bismarck. This episode is a socio-political and historical comparison of organizational strategies, propaganda techniques, and the psychological role of published manifestos. We are not drawing a moral, ethical, or legal equivalence between the specific heinous content of the historical document and the modern policy proposal. Any discussion of the sitting executive or political figures is focused on the archetype of power and the effects of policy, not the private conduct of any individual. The views expressed are solely the host's and do not reflect those of anyone else. We're Civil Defiance, and this is your show. Welcome to Civil Defiance. I'm Otto Bismarck. There is a moment in history that repeats itself, not as farce, but as a chilling tragedy. It is the moment when a radical political faction publishes its entire terrifying roadmap, its blueprint for dismantling democracy, in plain sight, and the populace, due to distraction, partisan loyalty, or intellectual laziness, simply ignores the warning. Today, we are undertaking a necessary, volatile, and deeply sensitive comparison, the parallel between the publication and reception of Kampf in the 1920s and the publication and reception of Project 2025 in the 2020s. I contend that the two documents serve the same structural purpose. They are public warnings that the Uniparty and its extreme wings are desperate for you to read and then immediately dismisses hyperbole until it is far too late. The most striking parallel is the timing of publication versus the seizure of power. The historical manifesto, the core document, was published in 2 volumes in 1925 and 1927. The author did not take power until 1933. That is a gap of 6 to 8 years. The entire world had nearly 10 years to read, translate, and understand the core ideology. The explicit calls for the systematic elimination of political rivals, the aggressive expansion into neighboring territories, and the specific scapegoating of a racial minority as the source of all national failure. Yet, the consensus among elites in the late 1920s was dismissal. The book was poorly written, rambling, and the ideas were too extreme to ever be taken seriously by a modern, sophisticated nation. The Modern Blueprint Project 2025, this 900-plus page document, the Shadow Mandate, was publicly released years before the current cycle, serving as a comprehensive, agency-by-agency roadmap for the overhaul of the U.S. executive branch. It explicitly details the civil service purge, the Schedule F proposal, the politicization of the Justice Department, the targeting of specific social and cultural issues, and the centralization of all power under the executive. And what is the dominant elite reaction? The Uniparty leadership on both sides attempts to manage the narrative. One side calls it authoritarian plot but doesn't truly fight it. The other side dismisses it as a policy wish list or deep research from a think tank. They are repeating the exact failure of the 1920s, willful blindness to a declared enemy's transparent battle plan. The core lesson is this: authoritarian figures never hide their true intentions. They publish them. They know that the public, addicted to distraction and partisanship, will treat a public manifesto as a piece of political theater rather than a binding contract for their future governance. The most insidious parallel is the mechanism used to rally the mass base. The use of racially coded language dressed in the impenetrable armor of patriotism. Both documents leverage a deep visceral resentment against groups perceived as undermining the true national identity. The German Way. The historical manifesto relentlessly scapegoated the Jewish parasite and the Marxist traitor for the failure of the post-war German state. This was blind racism masked as loyalty to the German way, the pure Aryan, heroic nationalism that needed to be cleansed of foreign elements. The document appealed to populations, the dispossessed middle class, the young men who felt betrayed by the war's end, the farmers who felt ignored, by giving them a simple, single, and non-economic explanation for all their suffering. The outsider did it. This allowed millions to blindly vote for a genocidal platform because they genuinely believed they were voting for the restoration of their national dignity and their own economic security. The American Way, Project 2025, is far more sophisticated, but the mechanism is the same. The targets are not a single race, but ideologies and institutions associated with specific racial, gender, and political minorities. The document explicitly calls for purging woke culture warriors from the bureaucracy, targeting diversity, equity, and inclusion DEI initiatives, and restricting LGBTQ rights. This is blind racism and cultural prejudice masked as loyalty to the American way. The document appeals to populations, the culturally anxious, the religious fundamentalists, the working class who feel their values are under attack, by giving them a simple, single, and non-economic explanation for all their suffering. The liberal administrative elite did it. They are mobilized to blindly vote for policies that destroy the rule of law because they genuinely believe they are fighting for the restoration of American values against a perceived internal enemy. The result is identical. The masses are mobilized by fear and cultural resentment, while the uni-party operatives use the distraction to quietly rewrite the laws that affect everyone's liberty. Why do populations ignore a dangerous roadmap published in plain sight? Psychologists point to three core cognitive failures that were present in 1920s Germany and are rampant in 2025 America. Motivated reasoning. People accept something as true if it supports what they want to believe. If you are convinced the current administrative state is corrupt and biased against your way of life, you want to believe the shadow mandate is the only way to drain the swamp. You will ignore the parts about dismantling checks and balances because you are motivated to see it as a cleanup operation, not a power grab. Authoritarian seduction. In times of high societal change and economic anxiety, the post-World War I era, the post-COVID, polarized 2020s, large numbers of people seek a strong, dynamic leader who promises to cleanse and clarify society. They prefer answers over questions. They will pledge fealty to the leader who promises to restore their rightful place. They ignore the mandate's content because they trust the authority of the leader to wield the mandate responsibly. The over-intellectualization of evil, the elite class, in both cases, committed the same error. They saw the historical manifesto as a rambling text, not a political plan. Today, they see Project 2025 as technocratic jargon and a boring 900-page policy manual. They fail to understand that the complex details are just the engineering specs for the simple, emotional, rage-fueled ideology that is driving the masses. The elites dismissed the ideology, the masses ignored the engineering. Both led to the same destination. The only response to a publicly declared plot is to refuse to be the instrument of its execution. The historical mandate sought to put the entire nation in a uniform of racial loyalty. The modern mandate seeks to put the entire government in a uniform of ideological loyalty, the civil service purge. The ultimate civil defiance requires two actions: unmask the loyalty test. The Uni Party does not care about your policy opinions. They care about your loyalty. They want you to blindly vote against your own economic interests, against the rule of law, and against basic competence, all in the name of the American way. Your civil defiance must be to refuse that uniform. If a document or a candidate demands that you sacrifice truth for loyalty, You must choose truth. Defend the institutions they name. The blueprints are explicit. The historical document named the Reichstag and the Treaty of Versailles. The modern document names the DOJ's independence, the FCC's nonpartisanship, and the civil service merit system. The factions behind the shadow mandate hate these institutions because they are the structural roadblocks to total executive power. Your civil defiance must be directed toward defending the independence and transparency of the institutions they have explicitly targeted for destruction. The biggest danger is not that the Uniparty has a plan. The danger is that the people have the plan, and they are looking at it with willful blindness, convinced that this time their leaders will not actually follow the roadmap they published. History tells us they always follow the roadmap. The burden of defense is no longer on the generals. It is on the citizens who still refuse to believe the words written in front of them.